Hello, it's that guy from last year. Here is a PowerPoint where we are looking at 7.3, so it's Hardy-Weinberg evolution topic, and looking at types of selection. Enjoy. Types of selection theory. So you need paper, pens, plenty of time to do this properly. You might have a copy of your textbook handy. Those are the pages, and your workbook, page 15 to 18. So we're looking at stabilizing, directional and disruptive selection from the spec. But of course, a little bit of work for you to do first. To fully understand what we're going to talk about, you need to be happy with these terms. And I would suggest 10 minutes, put this on pause and have a go. You should be now pausing the video. I'm having a cup of coffee. If you're not pausing the video, then you really should have a go. You need to know those words. Hopefully you followed my instructions, and let's have a look through these. Population, all of the individuals of the same species in an area. Overproduction, parents will produce more offspring than are going to survive. Offspring produced by the parents. Variation, in any population there is variation. Might be height, weight, colour, resistance to something. Mutations, change in the DNA, might give you an advantage or might not. Gene flow, this is over time the flow of genes from parents into the offspring and so on over many generations. Intraspecific competition. This is competitions between members of the same species, same species, for things like food, nesting places, light. Fitness is how well you can survive and reproduce, really. Selection pressure, this might be food, predators, light, disease, so whatever's going to affect whether organisms can survive and reproduce. Survival and breeding, pretty straightforward. Living and then going on to reproduce. Alleles might be favourable, or sometimes we could say advantageous alleles. So these are the ones that are going to lead to better survival. Inheritance, that's just hereditary, it's just genetics. And generations, parents, offspring, and then their offspring, and so on. The gene pool is all of the alleles present in a population, and you look at those in particular. Look at is the frequency of alleles going up or down over time. Allele frequency, which is the proportion of that allele as a part of the total alleles for that gene. And evolution is change over time. As ever, there's many places on the internet that describe this with much better pictures and animations and so on than we're doing here. I like the Amoeba Sisters, and they've got a nice natural selection video. So here are three types of selection: directional, stabilizing and disruptive, and we'll have a look at those graphs and try and give you some more examples. If you look at the graphs to start with, the easiest one to think about is a stabilizing selection, where we've got a peak in the middle and the selection tends to make this peak higher. keeps things in the middle. On the left we've got directional selection, and this moves the peak in a direction. So here we're moving it to the right. And our disruptive selection, things in the middle are not favoured, but things on either side are favoured. So we tend to get peaks on either side. So we'll look at those. So stabilising selection. This tends to favour individuals in the middle. So average individuals, or sometimes they talk about the modal average. So the mean is the kind of arithmetic average. Add them all up, divide them by however many you've got. The mode is the most common. So quite often they say the modal average, which is the most common trait, is favoured. And with babies, if you are a baby, the best thing to be is completely average. And if you're an average baby in terms of mass, weight, then you're more likely to survive and reproduce and pass on those alleles for being of medium weight. The reason for this is if you are large or heavy, then this often leads to complications with birth. And so in the past, a lot of babies and mothers will have died, maybe because the baby can't fit through the birth canal, or some other complication has been too big. And also very small babies would tend to be underdeveloped in terms of things they need to survive, keep warm. They're too small, they've got large surface area to volume ratio, immune system's not very well developed. These days with modern medicine, we'll keep these large babies and small babies alive. And things like hospital incubators and cesarean sections and things like that. But in the past, being average weight would be the best, and so you would pass on those alleles to the next generation. You're more likely to survive and reproduce. Directional selection, and here we've got away from the average to one side. So the example you've got in your workbook is of the cheetah. Cheetahs are very famous for being very fast. And you can imagine that if you are a cheetah relying on speed to catch your prey, which are also quite fast runners, then a faster cheetah will be at a selective advantage. And so over time, there's kind of like an arms race where animals will get faster and faster. And so this is one of the things that you might imagine will be directional in favour of faster and faster cheetahs. If you are a slow cheetah, then you can imagine you won't catch any prey, you won't be able to eat, you won't survive and reproduce, and you won't pass on those alleles for being a slow cheetah. So those cheetahs cheats never beat. Oh, that's a bad. Right, last one. Disruptive selection, always harder to think about. This is where the extremes are favoured. And the example that we've got for you is with oysters. Oysters are famous for being a seafood delicacy, and they have magical properties. Ask your teacher, or ask your parents about the properties of oysters. Wonderful things they do. However, if you are an oyster yourself, then you live in the sea, and on the bottom of the sea you might imagine there'd be bits where they're just sandy and you can see the sunshine that goes through onto the seafloor, or there might be kind of shadows under rocks or under plants and seaweed and things like that. So in this example, the oysters that are favoured, there's variation for colour from light through to dark, and the oysters that are favoured are to the extremes of these. So very light oysters and very dark oysters. The light oysters survive best in the kind of open, exposed areas where they blend in with the well-lit seafloor. And the dark oysters, well, where there are shadows out of the sun, they will be camouflaged against predators. And the intermediate oysters are not favoured. Whether any of that is actually true or not, I don't know, but it's a classic example of disruptive selection. So there you've got our 3 again, and there's a couple more examples down the bottom for you to consider. And here are some examples for you to think about. Just give it a couple of minutes. Height in humans, the length of the fur if the weather conditions, climate conditions stay the same. Let's remember our salamanders going down the coastal region of California where the red poisonous newts are. And fur length if the climate is getting colder and colder. So pause your video and have a think of those. What type of selection are they? Are they directional, stabilizing, or disruptive? Hopefully you reached for your pause button and got your pen and paper busy. Height in humans, well, it's a bit like mass of babies in humans. So average sized humans are favoured. There are health conditions associated with very tall or very short, extremes of height in humans. Fur length in stable climate conditions, so this is also stabilizing. So height in humans is stabilizing. Fur length in stable climate conditions, so the ones in the middle are better favoured. Imagine if your fur is too long, you get too hot. If your fur is too short, you'll be too cold. Salamanders migrating into an area with red poisonous newts. Well, those salamanders that look more and more like the newts will survive and reproduce due to mimicry of the poisonous newts. And so you get a directional selection in favour of more and more redder salamanders. So that's directional. The original salamanders that aren't red, they will not be favoured. And fur length in the climate getting colder, well, you'd imagine the longer fur will be favoured, so shorter fur will not be favoured, and the medium fur also not very well favoured. And so that is directional in favour of longer fur. And next lesson, speciation. So how we get species that are separate to each other, able to breed and produce fertile offspring. So how does all that happen? Next time.